Welcome to the deep dive. Today, we're really digging into something fundamental, our environment.
Absolutely essential.
Yeah, we've pulled together a whole stack of insights, mainly from a source called Sevremiz.pdf. That's Turkish for our environment.
Mm.
And this isn't just about, defining what's natural versus human-made. We want to get into the real challenges.
Nitty-gritty.
Exactly, nitty-gritty. And maybe find some, well, actionable solutions we can all think about.
That's the key, right?
Yeah.
Actionable.
Totally. So our mission for you, listening in, is to pull out those key bits of knowledge. Help understand that delicate balance, our planet, our role. Think of it as a shortcut to getting really informed on a topic we just can't ignore.
A vital topic.
So to start, we talk about the environment all the time, but this report, it actually breaks that down first. What's the key distinction it's making, and why is that so important, do you think?
Well, it's a great place to start because the report pushes back against just thinking of environment as, untouched wilderness.
Right, like forests and mountains far away.
Exactly.
Yeah.
It makes it clear that, yes, it includes the natural world, forests, seas, animals, all that. But it also includes the places we build and live in.
Our cities, parks.
Our cities, our schools, even local parks, yeah. And the crucial point is, it doesn't matter if it's natural or human-made. The environment, in this broader sense, is foundational for life. Full stop.
Okay.
So when it degrades, whether it's a remote forest or the air quality in our city, it hits our health directly. It really connects our immediate surroundings to the bigger picture.
That really shifts the focus, doesn't it? It's not out there, it's right here.
Precisely.
So given how, well, foundational it is for our health, our existence, what are the biggest threats? What does the source material identify as the most critical environmental issues we're facing right now?
Yeah, the sources are pretty direct. They don't really pull any punches. They list several critical problems needing urgent focus. Air pollution, for instance.
Okay, smog, car fumes.
Yes, but it goes deeper. It's not just, difficulty breathing. The report talks about fine particulate matter, stuff you can't even see,
Right.
from cars, industry, and it's linked to serious things like heart disease, maybe even cognitive issues. It literally gets inside us.
Wow, okay.
Then there's water pollution. Plastic waste is flagged as a huge threat, especially to marine life.
I think we've all seen images.
Absolutely. The report mentions a specific documentary image, a sea turtle found with a plastic bag in its stomach. It's
Yeah.
just visceral. It shows how our waste directly harms vulnerable creatures.
Yeah, that hits hard.
And of course, climate change looms large. Huge global impact. The sources mentioned the really severe Australian wildfires.
Right, you mentioned those.
Yeah, they're a stark example. And it's not just fires, it's the increase in droughts, extreme heat, more powerful storms affecting animals and people.
It's all connected.
And deforestation, still a major concern. But what's really interesting, I think, is how the sources stress the interconnectedness. These aren't separate
Right,
boxes.
they feed into each other.
Exactly. It's a complex web. And it basically demands that we, rethink and change the habits we have that are harming nature.
That interconnectedness is, it's powerful, like a feedback loop. You mentioned the Australian wildfires. That brings these big global issues right down to a local level, doesn't it?
It really does.
So what specific lessons do the sources draw from events like that? How does it show what we can potentially do, maybe more locally?
Well, looking at those Australian fires, the sources use them as a prime example of how global climate shifts can ignite, literally, these very local crises.
Yeah.
They're so bad there because of the hot, dry summers, and the wind just whips them up so fast. They threaten huge natural areas, but also towns, homes, and tragically, so many animals.
It's devastating.
It is, but the lesson highlighted is about being proactive, prevention, and quick response. Things like public awareness campaigns, reminding people about fire safety, not being careless, and practical stuff like local authorities, clearing dry vegetation, making sure firefighting gear is ready to go. It shows how being prepared as a community can really lessen the local impact, even when facing these bigger environmental shifts.
So turning that awareness into actual readiness,
Okay.
which leads right into what I think a lot of us feel. You hear about these massive issues, global, local. It can feel a bit overwhelming.
Definitely.
So what practical things, like everyday steps, can we actually take? What do the sources suggest that could collectively make a real difference?
Yeah, and the sources really emphasize the power of adding up all those individual actions. It might sound a bit cliche, small steps.
But do they work?
Well, think about it like this. The sources suggest things like using cloth bags instead of plastic, If everyone, or even most people, made that one switch. Think of the billions of plastic bags not ending up in landfill or the ocean each year.
That's actually a huge number when you think of it like that.
It's a massive ripple effect. And beyond that, other basic habits. Sorting waste properly for recycling, paper, plastic, glass, organic stuff. Giving materials a second life.
Okay, standard stuff, but important.
Crucial. Conserving water. Simple things like turning off the tap when you brush your teeth, maybe taking slightly shorter showers, saving electricity, switching off lights you don't need, unplugging chargers and devices that are just sitting there.
The vampire drain.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And they even mention things like joining local cleanup events. Because doing that, actually seeing the rubbish, really brings home the damage. These aren't just like chores. They're conscious choices. And when lots of people make them, that's when we see real change.
It's powerful seeing how small adjustments, if adopted widely, really can add up. Okay, so taking that a step further, from individual habits to maybe more proactive projects, especially, say, in schools, what kind of interesting ideas do the sources suggest there?
Oh, there's a really creative one. Setting up a recycling garden at school.
A recycling garden, what's that?
Imagine kids bringing in recyclable stuff from home. Plastic bottles become flower pots. Cardboard boxes turn into birdhouses. Maybe old CDs become, I don't know, shimmering wind chimes.
Ah, okay, turning waste into something useful or beautiful.
No, exactly. It's art, it's environmental action, it teaches resourcefulness, all rolled into one. Super hands-on.
That sounds fantastic.
Yeah, and another idea mentioned is having monthly nature-themed days.
Okay.
So maybe student plays about nature, art shows, using natural materials, making posters, going for nature walks, making learning about the environment really active and engaging, not just, reading about it.
Yeah, connecting the abstract ideas to something real and, well, fun.
That's the idea.
Okay, broadening out again.
Mhm.
Thinking about community awareness, how does that vary? The sources mention Australia, for example. What's the picture there regarding environmental consciousness?
It's quite a nuanced picture, actually.
Yeah.
Generally, the sources suggest awareness in Australia is pretty high.
How?
Well, you see recycling bins everywhere. Most people seem committed to sorting waste. There are ongoing government campaigns about things like fire safety, saving water, energy use, and environmental education is apparently quite integrated into schools. Things like sustainability clubs, schools growing their own vegetables, pretty good stuff.
Sounds positive.
It is, but the report also points out areas that need work. You still find plastic waste on beaches sometimes, apparently. Yeah. And maybe an over-reliance on single-use products among some people.
Ah, okay. So progress, but not perfect.
Exactly. It highlights that even with good systems, ongoing education and just, setting a good example are still really important.
That makes sense. Progress, but keep pushing. So what happens then when, individuals or maybe society as a whole doesn't meet those responsibilities? What are the consequences described in the sources when we let things slide?
The sources are really clear on this. Dropping the ball on environmental responsibility creates huge problems, problems that ultimately affect us directly. Well, nature has this delicate balance, right? When we mess with it, it tends to bounce back on us. Take deforestation. It's not just losing trees.
Right. It's more than that.
Yeah, it leads to more air pollution. It messes up rainfall patterns, sometimes causing floods, sometimes droughts. In the oceans, that plastic solution we talked about, it doesn't just look bad, it actively kills marine life. That damages whole ecosystems and impacts industries like fishing.
Okay.
Then there's the loss of biodiversity, losing different species because their homes are destroyed. That makes natural systems weaker, less resilient. And closer to home, pollution is directly linked to more health problems.
Especially for vulnerable people.
Exactly. Kids, the elderly, which then drags down the whole quality of life for society. Even things like cities growing without proper planning, losing green spaces, it all adds to the pressure.
It really is all connected.
It absolutely is. And the report stresses that even small things, like not littering, genuinely make a difference in preventing these bigger negative outcomes. It's like that butterfly effect idea. Small choices ripple outwards.
That ripple effect.
Yeah.
Yeah. And speaking of influence, another powerful force the sources mention is the media. TV, internet, social media. How do they shape how we see these issues and maybe whether we act?
Oh, the media's role is huge, according to the sources. Across all platforms, really.
Oh, good or bad?
Potentially both, but definitely powerful for raising awareness. Documentaries, news stories, social media campaigns, they can really get environmental issues onto people's radar.
Hmm.
The sources point out that short videos, striking photos, personal stories, they can have a really profound effect. Remember that sea turtle image?
Yeah, you mentioned it earlier.
It's mentioned again because for many people, apparently, seeing something like that was a real trigger. It made them personally decide to cut down on single-use plastic.
A catalyst.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And young people especially seem quite influenced by social media content on this.
But there's a downside, too.
Yes, there's a caution flag raised about reliability. Media can galvanize action, which is great, but it can also spread misinformation or maybe exaggerate things.
Yeah.
So finding trusted sources is key.
Right.
But overall, the message is that when used responsibly, media is an incredibly effective tool for getting the word out and mobilizing people.
A double-edged sword, maybe, but potentially very powerful for good. Okay, so if we were drawing on these ideas, media influence, individual action, and we wanted to design an environmental campaign, what might that look like? How would we make it impactful?
Well, based on those principles, something like a one-day plastic-free campaign could be really compelling.
Okay, why plastic-free?
Because plastic is just so persistent, right? It lasts for hundreds, maybe thousands of years. The harm it does to animals, ecosystems, it's severe and often hidden.
So make it visible.
Exactly. The campaign would really lean into social media sharp videos, eye-catching posters, maybe try and get some celebrity involvement to boost the signal.
Mhm.
You could organize events in schools, in local communities, really get people involved directly, and maybe offer small rewards or recognition for kids or groups who come up with clever alternatives to plastic.
Encourage innovation.
Right. The core idea is to let people feel what it's like to make a difference, even just for one day.
Yeah.
Show them that small changes, when done together, can actually lead to something big.
Yeah.
And, this kind of idea brings up a really important question.
Which is?
Is tackling something huge like climate change just down to governments? Or do individuals like us actually have a significant role to play?
Yeah, the responsibility question, that comes up a lot. What's the perspective from the sources on that balance?
The sources argue pretty strongly that it's definitely a shared responsibility. It's not one or the other.
Okay.
Governments absolutely have a central role, no question. They make the laws, they regulate factories, they set energy policy. That's huge.
Right, the big picture stuff.
But the sources also really emphasize the cumulative power of individual actions, things we do every day. Choosing to cycle or walk instead of drive, switching to energy-saving light bulbs, being careful with water, sorting our recycling properly, just being more conscious about what we buy, avoiding excessive packaging.
It all adds up.
It all adds up. And beyond our own habits, individuals can support environmental groups, sign petitions, make their voices heard collectively. The core message seems to be, don't underestimate the impact of individual choices. If enough people make small changes, it can drive major transformation. Protecting the future, they say, is everyone's job.
So it's not either, it's definitely a both-hand situation. Okay, if we take that idea of responsibility to the global level, who bears more of it when it comes to pollution? Is it developed countries or developing countries?
That's a tough one, and the sources suggest the weight falls more heavily, historically at least, on developed countries.
Why is that?
Well, think about it historically. Since the Industrial Revolution, it's largely been the developed nations doing most of the emitting, most of the consuming. That's built up over a long time.
Right, the legacy effect.
Exactly. And even now, the sources point out that many wealthier nations still have very high consumption rates, and sometimes they even export their waste problems to developing countries.
That doesn't seem right.
No. And despite having the technology and the money, they don't always invest enough in environmental protection, either at home or helping others.
But developing countries have a role, too.
Oh, absolutely. The sources acknowledge their contribution too, often through things like rapid industrial growth without strong environmental controls or unplanned city expansion. It's definitely a global problem.
So what's the conclusion, then?
The conclusion seems to be that while everyone has a part to play, a fair solution really requires the developed world to step up, commit more resources, and take, frankly, a greater share of the responsibility, given their historical impact and current capacity.
That provides some important context for the global picture. And given that pollution, climate change, these things obviously don't care about borders. How can countries actually work together effectively on this?
Yeah, the sources are emphatic about this. International cooperation isn't just nice to have, it's absolutely essential.
Because one country can't solve it alone.
Exactly. Think about ocean plastic. It just drifts wherever the currents take it. So no single country's efforts are enough. Yeah. That's why things like global agreements are so important. The Paris Climate Agreement is mentioned as a key example.
What do agreements like that actually achieve?
Well, they set up a framework. Goals for reducing emissions, pushing for more renewable energy, sharing cleaner technologies. It's about getting everyone pulling in roughly the same direction.
Okay.
The sources also suggest practical cooperation, like developed countries helping developing nations with things like clean energy technology, better waste management systems, or water treatment.
Sharing expertise and resources.
Precisely. And things like joint projects, maybe replanting forests together, working on conserving shared natural areas, getting young people involved in international environmental discussions, all seen as crucial steps.
It really paints a picture of needing a truly global collaborative effort. So, looking ahead, what does all this mean for the future? And how do we make sure we're building towards a better one? Education seems key here.
Education is presented as, basically, the bedrock, the cornerstone for building a lasting environmental consciousness.
How so?
The thinking is pretty straightforward. If kids develop a real love and understanding of nature when they're young,
They'll care about it when they're older.
exactly, they're much more likely to become adults who act responsibly towards the environment. So, the sources argue that education systems need to really prioritize this, give it the same importance as, say, maths or literature.
Make it core, not an add-on.
Right. And it shouldn't just be theory from a textbook. It
Right.
needs to be practical, hands-on.
Like the recycling garden idea.
Yes, like that. And other things. Getting kids outdoors, doing cleanup drives, having recycling bins right there in the classroom, watching documentaries, practicing saving energy in the school itself, building sustainability into how the school operates.
Making it real.
Making it real and encouraging students to take the lead too, maybe through environmental clubs. The ultimate goal, the sources suggest, is to instill a real sense of responsibility. Because teaching kids to love nature is, in effect, the best way we have to protect the future.
What an incredible arc we've covered. From understanding just what environment means to the huge impact of our small choices, and then scaling up to global cooperation and the power of education. It really does drive home how interconnected everything is.
It certainly does.
And how those seemingly small daily decisions can, well, echo out in such significant ways.
Which makes you think, imagine if that awareness, sparked by maybe just one powerful image, like that turtle, imagine if that translated into a real commitment from every single one of us to embrace something like that one-day plastic-free idea, but not just for a day. What if it became a real guiding habit? What kind of transformation could that truly unleash for our planet?